This is Rising Phoenix Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. This podcast is for men struggling with an unwanted divorce. I interview experts on divorce, mental health, and I provide insights gained from my own divorce journey. You are not alone. Join me. Joining me today is Dr. Stacey Pinatelli. Dr. Stacey, let's just jump right into this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thank you for having me first off. Have recently completed my postdoctoral training in clinical psychology. Most of my training has been within the VA healthcare systems.
Oh.
I have focused mostly on PTSD, trauma, and serious mental illness. And so that is taking me a full scope of populations, to be honest.
Yeah.
But along the way, I've really fine-tuned how trauma shows up in other ways and other types of conditions, specifically depression, anxiety, and so forth.
Well, that's awesome. First of all, I'm a veteran, so thank you for helping out my fellow veterans. That's awesome. What we're going to focus on a little bit here is depression.
Mhm.
I think that there is, first, let's define it because I like to define things. And I think maybe there's two definitions in terms of like there's normal depression and then there's what I think, you talk about, and obviously others have talked about as high functioning depression, but
Mhm.
let's cover both of those. What's the definition of both?
Okay, so instead of saying normal depression, let's call it like classic depression. Like, how does it present? So, a lot of times when we think of depression, we imagine like a total collapse, where people are not motivated or they're feeling where they can't even function. They're not able to shower, they're maybe not working, and just the things they were doing before are actually not happening in their lives. So, you see a little bit of impairment. That's how we would define classical depression.
Gotcha.
High functioning depression is quite the opposite. It's when it can actually look like you're showing up. You're meeting deadlines, you're taking care of everything, but inside you're falling apart. And so the difference I like to see it is when you see classic depression, people notice that, right? People notice the impairment and
Sure.
they're worried. And sometimes you have all these people trying to like support you or intervene. But when you have high functioning depression and it's not showing on the outside, it's everything seems intact and you even can seem impressive or maybe even successful if you want to use that term. But on the inside, they're feeling exhausted, numb, like this heaviness. And that's how I would define the two, like just looking at the difference. And we can talk about later why it's easy to miss that. But just to define, that's how I would define both of them.
Yeah, I mean, it leads to so many questions. So I'm going to ask you a question that might not be completely fair, and maybe I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious. What is the percentage of like classic depression and high functioning depression? Like for those that have depression, is there data that shows like most people have high functioning or only 10% or whatever? Is there any kind of, I'm just curious.
I'll be honest with you, I've not looked up the statistic on that. What I'll see in my clinical work, mostly what I see is mostly classical depression. The high functioning depression tends to show up in people that have certain personality traits. Like, we're going to talk later, I think, a little bit about perfectionism. That may be why it shows up more that way. It also comes to show up more in roles. Like, what does this person have in their life? Are they, the provider? Are they maybe even a single parent? Like, those things are going to impact typically how the high functioning is going to show up versus the classical depression. And it's oftentimes because they can't fall apart.
Yeah, they don't have a choice. That's
Hmm.
interesting. Oh man, that leads to so many other questions. But I'm going to get way off track. Um, um, why? Okay, so if let's say it's in some ways potentially role based or role influenced, right? So if you sort of have to hold it all together, um, then you do. So what is it about? Actually, let me pivot to
Hmm.
something else. Is there, again, probably not fair, but in your experience, in terms of like high functioning and classic, is there a man woman split?
I would say that's hard to define. because again, it comes back to our roles. So if you're thinking about a single mom, for example, her presentation may be quite different than, say, a single father. And I think that comes to other roles that come into play when we're talking about what roles we have within our family. And so I would say that depression oftentimes mostly shows up classically more among women. And that is statistically shown that depression often falls into like a gender, more women expose it. But I would like to challenge that because I think maybe it's being hidden. So maybe we're not seeing the statistics showing that men are exhibiting depression because they're not talking about it, or
Yeah.
they have this high functioning depression where they're not able to say, I'm not okay. They're not giving
Yeah.
themselves permission. So I think that if we looked at statistics, it's skewed. It's
Yeah.
skewed because there's also a stigma and there's also things that aren't being allowed to be addressed. And I think men oftentimes do tend to hold back what they're actually experiencing, or they don't even label it as depression. They label it as something else.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where we're heading, I think, is, and this isn't sort. I mean, it's generalized. Everyone's different and all that kind of stuff. I have
Mhm.
to say that often because people get upset. But I don't know every single man, and I don't know every single woman,
Mhm.
nor do I know the ones that with depression or not. But it seems like the high functioning thing is a necessary part of their lives. Like they, if they could lay in bed, they probably would, but they
Mhm.
can't, and so therefore they have this um ability, I guess, to push through despite the depression. And does that mechanism, that like I don't have a choice, also sort of inform their ability to hide it, if that makes sense? Do you know what I mean? It's like they don't have a choice, so they don't maybe they feel like they can't express it, or is that, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like there's
Mhm.
something there.
I think you're right. And I don't know if it's hiding it or they're not able to give themselves the opportunity to feel it. And
Mm,
sometimes it shows up differently for high functioning depression, right? Remember, we're talking about not being impaired. So they're able to go to work, they're able to succeed sometimes really well at what they're doing. And it's missed, even though they may be experiencing the same, feelings, the irritability, the fatigue, all of those things are still there. It's just not being presented that way. And so to answer your question, if they could lay in bed, would they? I mean, I think all of us, when we're tired, we want to just lay in bed, right? So my
yeah.
answer would be yes.
Yeah.
But in their roles, or maybe even in their way of being, I have to push through. I
Right, right, right.
cannot stop. I can't let this get to me, is going to motivate them to continue doing what they're doing.
Okay.
And so I think you're right. I think there is a little bit of hiding what they're
Yeah.
feeling. I call that emotional avoidance.
Oh, yeah.
So they're avoiding naming it because if they were to do that, then they would have to address that they may not be as okay as they think they are, even though they're being quite successful in what they're choosing to do day in, day out.
I think the world is full of those kind of people, if I'm being
I think
honest.
so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit, I might be one myself. So you mentioned, signs. And so if you're a man listening to this, you're going through divorce, you're obviously, it's a challenging time, right? Obviously, no question. What are some things that you can look for in yourself, to obviously you want to go to a professional to get diagnosis, but to
Mhm.
even push yourself to do that, what are some things that if you see, you might say to yourself, maybe I should go talk to somebody?
I think the thing is when you start thinking about what you've been doing and it's no longer working. So let me break that down. So when I said that they often feel like exhaustion, numbness, I mean, most of us do, right? Day in,
Sure.
day out, we feel those things. But it comes down to like, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. I'm starting to feel like the things I've been doing aren't, I'm hiding behind my roles. Like for example, I'm a helper. So that's my role, right? And that helping becomes kind of an armor for me. But if I started to notice that that role is no longer working day in, day out, and I start noticing that I'm feeling a little more drained, maybe I'm more reactive.
Mhm.
Let's talk about men in general, because
Sure.
I think one side, again, not everybody's the same, and we're
Right,
going to
right.
put that out there. But if I'm just thinking about like the work that I've done with
Sure.
certain men,
Sure.
One thing that I've noticed in high functioning depression is that they're a little bit more reactive instead of responsive.
Hmm.
So maybe they were really patient at one time, but that seems to have like dissipated slightly. Not saying that they're, throwing chairs or doing anything like that,
Right, right, right.
but they're just a little more on edge. And small things start to feel bigger. Maybe they're snapping at people that they care about, and then they feel really bad about that. Another thing I think shows up a lot is compulsive busyness.
Hmm.
So, work isn't just important, it's almost like mandatory. Like I have to do this because if I slow down, I'm going to have to deal with whatever's underneath that I'm not showing everyone.
Right, right. Yeah.
And that can feel like silence itself can feel really threatening.
Now,
And go ahead.
yeah. So in that sort of vein, like there's a workaholic, a perfectionist type of thing, right? This, how do you differentiate, Jesus, between like, if you've always kind of been that way in terms of you've always been a perfectionist, right? And how do you know, like, how do you know if what you're experiencing, if it's a perfectionist type of mindset, how do you know if like what you're doing is being a perfectionist or hiding from something? Like, how can you make that determination?
That is a really difficult thing to answer, right? Because like if you've been doing it your whole life, it would be harder for you to even know if that's a sign of something's off.
Yeah.
And I think the key is really knowing the numbness you feel. So like when we're being and I'll admit I'm one of those. So when we're being a perfectionist, we have like these goals, these ambitions, these things like we want to accomplish. There's something behind it. But if I start to notice, or if anyone starts to notice, like, well, I don't really feel that drive. I feel more numb than anything, but I'm still doing it because that's what
Right.
I do.
Right.
That to me would be an indication maybe this isn't just about my personality. Maybe there's a shift in why I'm doing it.
Yeah. It makes me sort of think of like signs and looking for things like we were
Hmm.
talking about. And as a man who works with a lot of other men, sees a lot of other men, thousands of men, um, I am sure that I am missing signs. Like
Hmm.
probably guys, even guys in my own like personal friends, like not in the divorce support sphere. I'm talking about, two of my best friends. Like I will wonder sometimes, see how's he really doing? And we're very bad at that. But what are some things if guys are listening and they're friends with me, what are some things they could look out for? Because I think, one of the things that your blog post talked about was like the helpers and therapists and stuff where they can use that role as a cover, right? And so
Hmm.
guys, if you see in any of the things she's about to say, feel free to reach out. So what are some things people could look for in my behavior? I mean, I'm sure it's a similar thing, but like from the outside in, it's going to be a little different. What could they look for, or me with my other friends to determine,
Hmm.
hey, maybe I need to have a chat with him, see how he's doing.
I think it's paying attention to language too. So, like, most often people don't say, I'm feeling depressed, but they might say things like, well, I'm just really tired, or I'm feeling really burnt out, or I don't feel like myself anymore. And those could be really good indicators of, like, hey, maybe this person isn't as put together as I think this person is. And, that's one of the things that comes up a lot is when people say I'm depressed, we can just jump in as helpers, right? Okay, let's talk about that. But if someone comes and says, "Well, I'm just tired. I'm burnt out," then we try to like address like, "Well, can we reduce the stress?" But
Right.
maybe we're missing that piece is like what they're really
Uh,
saying is, I am not sad, but
yeah.
I'm also feeling very down and unable to do what I used to do, even though I am doing it, even though I am pushing forward. So if your listeners are listening, maybe noticing how you used to do things in comparison to how you're doing them now.
Mm,
So if that pushing has become the reason why you're feeling tired, the reason why you're feeling burnout, then maybe it's that pushing that's the sign,
mm. Interesting.
not like it used to be before.
Interesting. So that leads me to think, okay, what if one of my good friends Albert is listening and he's like, I think I've been hearing that in Michael lately. What does
Mhm.
he do? And this this may sound like a trite question, but like this is important because I think men are really bad at this part.
Hmm.
If Albert sees it, like you know what, I think Michael is a little maybe he's a little depressed. How does he handle that? What does he do? Like, how do you get someone to acknowledge something that they're hiding from?
I mean, that is the hard part, right? Because most of
Right.
us that are hiding something don't really want to acknowledge
Fuck
it,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I think this actually comes in with the support that I was mentioning. I think, we miss this in people because we take people at face value. So if your friend is showing up like strong, you may not, or even he may not want to
Sure.
address it because he's got this facade, right? And
Right.
we like strong. We like it's comfortable.
Yeah.
We don't, when we look at a strong person, we're like, they don't ask us for anything. So we're good with that.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say to your friend is, reach out to other people and you don't have to like name it. You don't have to like
Right.
say, this is what I'm feeling,
Right.
but you could just allow yourself to be in the presence of people that are going to support you if you were able to say, you know what, I'm not feeling that strong right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all you have to say. You don't have to say I'm depressed
Right. Right.
or I'm struggling with divorce.
Right. Right.
You just say, I'm really not where I used to be.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to either talk about it or not talk about it.
Right.
That's where you start addressing that emotional avoidance, is really kind of naming it. But you
Yeah.
don't have to necessarily fix it. You don't have to necessarily say, I'm depressed. I need to fix this.
Well, that's a good segue because eventually, I think if you are able to face it, right, one of
Hmm.
the next questions is going to be, how do I fix it? What do I do? How do I not be this way anymore? Like what? And especially for men, I don't like again generalizing, but for me, I think most men, not all, but most, and not all women aren't, but I'm a logical fella. Give me step
Hmm.
one and tell me how long it's going to take. Now I know that's not how it works, but if we could break down and give some things that guys can
Hmm.
do to get and move past or through or whatever verbiage you want to use, if they are depressed.
Okay, and that we're going to address because the step-by-step thing, we would all love that, right? But if
Absolutely.
you're a guy that's never asked for help,
Mm.
but you're the one that people rely on, the first step isn't going to be breaking down all of these steps or even a big confession
Damn it.
because there's no rush to fix yourself. You don't need this five-step plan.
Yeah.
What you need is just a little bit more support than you've been giving yourself. So I would say think smaller.
Okay.
So if just telling one person one honest sentence, back to what I was saying.
Sure.
So for example, like I'm not okay. I'm tired in a way that every time I sleep, it doesn't fix it. Or even I don't know how long I can keep doing this alone. Like those are the three. That's it. You don't need to tell your whole story. You just have to crack that beginning part of breaking that emotional avoidance.
So is that the key? Is just starting to look at it, right? Because as the cliche as it sounds, but I love it. Is if you don't feel it, if you don't feel it, you can't heal it. So if you're not going to look at it, you can't feel it. So I'm guessing that's sort of because there is no easy answer, right? It's not
No.
like if you just do 25 jumping jacks every morning, you'll be fine. Like just I mean, just do that. So it's just looking at it is the way you start healing and overcoming or whatever, again, whatever kind of language you want to use. Like there's no cut and dry sort of like this is how you exactly this is what you do.
No, and I think high functioning depression is a little bit more, and I'm not to say one's worse than the other, but a
Right.
little bit more complicated than classic depression, right? Because in classic depression, what I said earlier, people notice.
Right.
You're not only battling what you may be trying to hide, but also that no one's noticing.
Mm,
You're not having these outward ways of people to kind of check in with you. And that makes it lonely, right? That makes it
yeah.
even harder because you're like, well, I don't really have people checking on me. So maybe I am fine. Maybe it's just all in my head. Maybe it's just
Oh,
something I need to push through more. And then you get in the cycle of just push through, just push through,
yeah.
just push through.
Yeah.
And because it's high functioning, you do.
Yeah. So okay. So when you're in that sort of when you start thinking about it, well, maybe I'm okay. Maybe I just don't know how to do this. Maybe I'm just no good at life or whatever. How do you? especially when you go through a divorce, you kind of feel like a failure,
Mhm.
and then that's probably compounded by depression and all those kinds of things. And so, how do you sort of shift from like I'm going through something versus I'm broken or that I'm no good or I'm a failure? Like, how do you make that? It's not subtle at all. How do you make that shift?
I think the first thing is taking that word failure out of your vocabulary when you're going through a divorce. I mean, come on, divorce is one of the hardest things anyone can go through.
Hmm.
It's a loss of identity. It's a loss of a life. It's a grieving process.
Yeah,
So the word failure is kind of a self-fulfilled prophecy if we use that term, right? Because it took two people
yeah,
in that situation. So I think just getting rid of that word, maybe changing it to this didn't work.
yeah.
This didn't work. I had a part in it,
Right.
but that doesn't define who I am as a person right now.
Yeah, it's a hard. It can be a hard. Well, I mean, some people swing the other way and just
Mm-hmm.
point the finger. That I see lots of
Mm-hmm.
that too. But it can be hard to because I think if if you go through life with high functioning depression anyway, and then a divorce happens, like there's already a
Mm-hmm.
message there that there's something wrong with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a message there because if you're high functioning, you're dealing with it in a way. I feel like it's like you there's a I deserve this kind of a feel to it because it's like, well, this is just how I am. This is who I am, or whatever. And then you go through something like that, and it kind of reinforces it in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's still even more motivation to just it's confirmation that there is something wrong with me. I am a failure. I can't, all these things. And so I think it makes it even more challenging to admit.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say it's also is the best. It's a shitty way to get to it, but it's the best opportunity to change who you are. Yeah, I mean, there's I mean, loss and trauma and grief. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're not fun, but they often lead to really awesome places. But it doesn't seem like that in the beginning.
Absolutely not. I mean, let's be honest, when you were talking about those patterns of thinking, right? That are that confirmation, you're not wrong. Every time you experience a divorce or a trauma or some event in your life, it's almost like we're sabotaging ourselves because we're like, There's the proof. There's the proof I'm not enough.
Yeah,
There's the proof that I'm not lovable." And you're not wrong. Those are some deeper things, thought patterns that we
sure.
would look at, especially if you were, working with a therapist, helping you kind of go through the feelings of depression. But you're not wrong in thinking like, in the end, I may come out realizing that I am this person, but you have to get through it in order to get there. And the problem with high functioning depression is a lot of times people don't notice it to even to get there.
Well, yeah, you're already sort of, I mean, hiding it and hiding behind it. Um, I mean, I see it all the time, guys that just seem stuck and they're
Hmm.
so comfortable in their it seems like they're not comfortable, but but like on the surface, but then you ask things like, well, what, have you met with a therapist? Have you like what are you
Hmm.
doing? Which I know it's a weird thing to do because it puts the blame on them in a way, but at the end of the day, like who is gonna get you out of where you are other than you, right? Now, not saying you
Hmm.
can't get help, obviously, but you got to be able to. Is it people are just comfortable in their pain if it's familiar, rather than potential safety of dealing with pain and looking at yourself? Is that what it is?
I think it's partially that. So, I mean, a simple analogy. When you put your hand over a hot fire, what do you naturally do?
Well, yeah, you pull that thing back.
Okay, we are designed to pull away from pain.
Oh, that's fucking brilliant. I never thought of it that way.
Okay, so beating ourselves up that we're reacting the way we were designed to do in the first place
Oh,
is the first thing we're doing that could potentially be harmful to us, right? So we need to address what we feel with more compassion than we possibly even know how to do. We actually pull away from pain because our brains are designed to do that.
mm,
That being said, when we do that too long, when we avoid too long, you'll start to see it in other ways. Hence, depression, relationships, even health. And I think the first thing is to start looking at those thoughts that you were talking about. Like when you think something's wrong,
Right.
that in itself could be enough to just start the process of where you need to go. I
Yeah.
mean, I can give you a really quick example.
Absolutely.
When there was a period in my life where on paper everything looked solid. I was working, I was showing up, I was taking care of people in and out of the therapy room. No one was worried about me, including me.
Hmm.
But I remember a specific night, I was sitting in my car after a long day. I turned the car off and I was just staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't crying, I wasn't panicking, but I felt like just kind of numb and empty. And my first thought wasn't something is wrong with me. My first thought was, oh, I'm being really dramatic. I just need to get out of this car and push
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
That's the part that people don't talk about is that when you're having
Yeah.
that high functioning depression, it doesn't show up. It doesn't say, I'm depressed, I'm here.
Yeah.
Hey, look at me, go talk to
Yeah.
someone. It convinces you that this is just your life. This is your responsibility. And it's a weakness that maybe you shouldn't admit to anyone. And even though I didn't feel broken, I was really disconnected. But I was still functioning.
Yeah.
So I probably ignored it longer than I should have.
Mm,
And I'm sharing this because I know there's people listening who have their own version of that exact moment,
mm,
sitting there where they're quiet, feeling off, and telling themselves there's nothing wrong. And you know what? It's not nothing. It's a sign of your body trying to talk to you in a way that's compassionate,
right.
but we're not able to get there because our bodies again are designed to pull away from that pain.
Is that why some folks struggle so much with loneliness is because it is quiet and they don't want to hear what the quiet gives them?
I mean, I think we're all pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So when you think about the quiet and your head's got all these thoughts, how does that feel?
I mean, for me, I've done a lot of work, so
Yeah, same.
I'm good. But there was a time,
Yep.
especially in the beginning, right? Especially in the beginning because the thoughts weren't good. The lonely, the silence, the void was filled with just negative. I am a failure.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't even. I mean, definitely suicide was on the
Mhm.
the top of the tip of the brain. I mean, it was a rough time. Now it's not so much, but I do see it all the time where guys are just like, I can't be alone, and they'll come up with these weird. And I'm not trying to blame them, but like one guy, I'm not gonna say his name obviously, but he was like, my heart is just too big. I have to give it to someone else. It's like, no, dude, you just don't want to be alone because you don't want that inner monologue to be able to run rampant.
Mhm. Well,
Um,
first off, thank you for sharing your story because I think
sure.
that may resonate with a lot of your listeners. But also going back to what you just said, we even if you've done the work, sometimes the quiet, the loneliness
Oh,
is
sure.
also because it doesn't feel safe. So some people who are high functioning, or some people that have experienced trauma even, that silence can feel very unsafe. And so we
Yeah.
try to feel it, right? We try to
Yeah.
keep staying busy, doing things that are gonna not that don't feel that silence.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong in the fact that if we are to address where we really are in the moment, we need to spend some time with ourselves
Yeah.
and being silent and maybe even countering that dialogue with like some really self-compassionate statements that maybe we need to hear and we haven't heard before.
I mean, doesn't that speak to like this is work? Like this is not an
Hmm.
easy thing. Like if you are struggling with mental health or anything, I'm sorry to say, like and that may sound daunting, but it's very hard. But it is possible. But it's fucking hard. Is that why most people? I mean, that's probably rhetorical, but isn't that why most people don't really do the work? Is because it is really hard.
I'd say I don't know why most people don't do the work because I'd be, like generalizing. So I don't
Right.
want to do that. But what I will say is that, yeah, it's a lot of work. And, again, can't give medical advice on this platform. But what I will say is if you see that it's affecting your life in any way, that possibly doing the work with a mental health professional would be a really good step in the direction for you to address those things that you're not able to do on your own, right? That's not to say that some people can't do it on their own.
Right. No,
But
no,
if you
yeah,
notice it,
sure. Yeah, I
if you
think,
notice it, that it like, I can't be alone. I need, like you said, you mentioned the
yeah,
friend,
yeah,
I have to have this someone.
yeah,
That to me is showing like, okay, there's this pattern
yeah,
to avoid the loneliness.
yeah.
And that may be something that would be really helpful to address.
Is
But
there
it's a
any?
lot of work.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's exhausting sometimes, but it's also nice to not spiral at 2 a.m., right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like that's cool. Um, so there is a payoff. Do you practice any particular modalities like for people, particularly people with depression, either high functioning or classical, like CBT or any of those types of things? Do you recommend folks a particular modality?
I think that would be something that they would determine with their mental health professional. But I will say that when I've worked with people with depression, whether it's high functioning or classic, we've used a lot of, ACT. It depends on the person, depends on the presentation, but
Mm,
acceptance commitment therapy can be really helpful because
yeah,
it's really addressing like those self-compassion statements I was talking about.
yeah.
CBT can be really helpful as well for depression if they're really stuck in these thought patterns and they're really needing help to kind of shift or change the way that they're thinking about themselves or their lives or others.
Yeah.
That can be extremely helpful. And then a lot of some people that are, kind of stuck in the grief process of the depression can really benefit from interpersonal therapy as well, IPT.
Okay, I never heard of that. I've done internal family systems.
That's a great one too.
I have my current therapist is internal family system. I love it. I think it's amazing because there are so many parts of me that just like this makes sense to me. It just like connects with me that modality, that view. There's like 600 Michaels running around up here, like, and so it's just like okay, I get that, but I've never. Can you talk a little bit about the interpersonal? I've never heard of that. If that's okay.
So, interpersonal therapy is where you're focusing on a specific thing in your life that is maybe fueling the depression. For example, it could be like role transition. So, coming out of the military and having difficulty, adapting to civilian life. That could be a role transition that would potentially be feeling this depression that you're experiencing. It could also be depression that's coming from like a conflict, a family or friend or something that has internally done focus on that. And then there are other types of things that it can address. But what it's really focusing is on one thing. So
Mm,
whatever that one thing is, the therapist and the client really focuses on this is the aspect of my life that I feel is feeling the depression. And that's the part that they work on solely.
interesting. In your experience and in your practices, like how often is it necessary to look back at someone's childhood to sort of heal some of these things? Like, doesn't it all kind of start there?
Coming from my trauma background, I would say yes, but there's a lot of people out there that you can potentially get from A to B without ever looking at the trauma that you've experienced.
Really?
I would say for those people that don't want to talk about the trauma, because there's a lot of evidence that shows that you don't necessarily have to talk about the traumas per se to be able to move through the trauma.
Really?
So maybe not working if you're one of those people who don't want to like bring up the memories and the narratives and all of that, that's okay.
Yeah.
But maybe addressing what feelings are coming from those experiences, what thoughts are coming from those experiences. Maybe people are having health issues that may be tied to like trauma being stored in the body and all of those things. So I am an advocate for trauma therapy, but I also want to acknowledge that a lot of people have the right and don't want to address that, and that's okay. But you still might need to look at how I feel because of these things, even if you never actually talk about the traumatic experience itself.
I hate to be specific, but let's say it's a PSD
PTSD.
from PTSD, sorry, from like war type stuff, right?
Mhm.
How much do those got? And again, generalizing and all that, like, apologies are abound, but like, how much do they have to look at any trauma, or do they just look at like sort of moving forward, right? That like how much do they have to talk about and deal with either childhood, if there is that there, and or the what led them to be in your office?
PTSD is a little bit different than, let's just say trauma-based experiences, because a lot of times the people that experience PTSD are really impacted by like nightmares or flashbacks or things like that. And so when we are talking about combat, we're probably going to focus more on the traumatic memory
Mm,
so that we can kind of process that and help that person not experience the flashbacks as much as they are. That being said, there are people with PTSD that have experienced childhood trauma. I've seen it go both ways, where they've done work where they're focusing on the narrative of the actual trauma. And I've seen work where they're just focusing on what they're experiencing in their bodies or their minds or their thoughts. EMDR is a really good example of a system that works with not going through the narrative per se, but really kind of focusing on what you're experiencing now.
interesting. Yeah, I've never done it. I've heard about. Actually, I did one. I had a therapist a long time ago. It was a long time ago. We did a session, just one, and never went back to it. I don't really know why, but I find it fascinating. Doesn't it like sort of? And I'm going to be layman about it because I am. Doesn't it sort of like take the past and bring it to the present in a way?
In what you're feeling in this moment, and then they focus on what is happening right now. Whereas prolonged exposure is where you're actually being exposed to what you fear, as well as the actual memories that come up when you're experiencing them, and you're literally listening to it over and over and over and being exposed to those memories. Quite different modalities with phenomenal results. So back to your question, it really does come down to the person. And that's why I said there's some people who prefer,
Yeah.
I want to go through these memories. I want to help if that's going to help with my depression or that's going to help with my anxiety. I really want to focus on the memories where you have other people who are like, I want to focus on right now, like how it's impacting me today. And I don't really want to dig that up. Then those modalities like EMDR have been really beneficial for people like that are in that situation. And I'm bringing depression into it because a lot of times there's a correlation.
I would
So
imagine.
if
Sure.
there's trauma in your history, they may say, oh, it's the trauma, but it's showing up as depression or it's
Mm.
showing up as, extreme anxiety or panic attacks even.
Mm. And this shit is so complex. This is why there are 211 episodes of the podcast. Because I mean there are so many different avenues and modalities and not I mean opinions of course, but like just ways to approach these things because I feel like
Mhm.
there's so much trauma in our world, so much hurt and pain. And it's God, it's sad. Do you ever, I'm gonna ask you a personal question, you don't have to answer, but as a therapist, I'm always curious about this because I do dabble in what you do, but I don't have a degree in that, and I missed the calling. That ship has sailed. Sucks for me, but like I kind of work with men. I see a lot of
Mhm.
pain. It doesn't ever really get to me, except for when I see them sort of staying stuck. That gets to me for
Mhm.
whatever reason. That's all. We could do a whole episode on my stuff. But does it ever get to you being a therapist and dealing with people's trauma? Like, does that ever weigh upon you?
I mean, absolutely.
How
I
would it
would think
not?
that we would
Yeah,
be not, I think when we go into this profession, we know the impact that it can have on us.
yeah.
So we take a lot of time of self-care and doing the things that we need to. But to be honest and to just be forefront, I've had situations where it it threw me. Like
Yeah.
it stuck. I felt, I'm gonna name it, depressed.
Yeah.
It really affected me. And those are the times where, I have to seek consultation and really work on my own therapy and do
Yeah.
those things, because if we were to hold all that
Yeah.
pain,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be beneficial to ourselves or to anyone else if we were to just hold on to it.
Do they
But yeah, there's
teach
been
you?
moments.
Do they teach you that in school? Is that like one of the parts of the curriculum? Like you better take care of yourself because it's tough out there.
They preach it, but I think you really learn it when you're face to face with the client and you're getting tons of supervision through 6 years of training. You're getting
Yeah.
tons of supervision and consultation, and you're learning how to address your own countertransference. You're learning how to address your own biases, and it's showing up in the room, and you're really having to figure out, okay, wait, I noticed that about myself. Like, okay, I need to go back here and figure that out if I'm going to be productive for this person. And so I think it's really on the job training
Mm,
that you really learn how to navigate your own feelings or expressions that come up in the room. And
mm.
when you're dealing with trauma, it can come up quite often,
Oh, I
you know.
bet. I can't imagine how you do it back to back to back to back. Like your sessions are, stacked. That must be exhausting some days, I would imagine.
I know a lot of people do stack their schedules. I personally did not find that beneficial for me.
Yeah.
So I need at least a 30-minute buffer if I can possibly manage it. It was a little bit harder at the VA, but
Yeah.
I do need that 30-minute. Maybe it's just to do some breathing exercises or
Sure.
some stretches or just something to kind of ground myself after listening
Yeah.
to, some traumatic stories that they're heavy. They weigh a lot on you. So I personally don't do back to back,
Yeah.
but
Well, yeah, this sounds like you've learned along the way not to do that. Well, and it's interesting that you say that you do things like breathing exercises or whatever. Like it just goes to show like those kinds of things are so very important, right? If you're facing stress in life, and who isn't, then you got to be able to do some of these things like soothing yourself, essentially, right? Like, isn't that incredibly
yeah, I
important?
love that you're saying soothing yourself because, like, that is the key. That would be the first step I would say to your listeners. When you're feeling, you mentioned earlier, when you're feeling like I'm feeling overwhelmed, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I would say the first thing is grounding,
Yeah.
and we don't put enough emphasis on how much that can bring us back to this moment, this present. It can stop all of those voices too.
Yeah.
Because if you're focusing on something that is grounding you, you're not able to focus on those thoughts. I mean, it's quick and easy as, and I'm going on a tangent, so please stop me if you want me
No.
to. But as simple as what I call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a very quick and easy. You can do it anywhere. You're feeling overwhelmed, and you just start looking around and you name 5 things you see. You describe it in detail. You name 4 things that you hear. Okay, describe it in detail, like the sounds of a bell or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And you go through and you do your senses. So
Yeah.
it's sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste. You don't have to do it in a certain order, but what you're doing is you're bringing yourself back to your body now.
Yeah.
You're bringing yourself to the present moment. Those dialogues cease to exist. I guarantee you, if you do it, you will
Yeah.
notice that you are
Yeah.
not able to think about it.
Yeah.
It's just as quick as that. I mean, you
Yeah.
could spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I've
Yeah.
done it so many times in between sessions. And it's
That's cool.
literally just, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
I am no longer feeling that like irritability, that
Yeah.
numbness, whatever it is that you're experiencing, especially when you have high functioning depression, is
Yeah.
to really kind of bring yourself back down. And then you could keep going. It's different than pushing through
Yeah.
because you're acknowledging what you're feeling
Yeah.
and you're taking that moment to ground yourself.
I mean, you have to, and it's so hard, and it's hard initially, I think, because right, we'd never. I'm 48 years old. Like, no one told me anything about any of this stuff until probably essentially when I went through a divorce, or maybe if they did, I wasn't hearing it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so if you go through your life, 30, 40, 50 years, and you're like, you've never done anything like this, and all of a sudden the advice is do this thing, and you're like, I tried that once and it didn't work. Like well, that's because it's not ingrained in your brain yet. Like
Mhm.
you really have to practice it and put effort into it. Easier said than done, of course.
It goes back to that effort, but I will say this because we can all relate. When you're trying to build muscle,
Yeah.
right? You're doing a workout plan, and how many of us quit before we ever see results, right?
Right,
Because
right,
it hurts or it's like
right.
tiring. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But those people who actually stay with their exercise program and they're building those muscles, eventually they have to increase weight because now that's too easy. And they keep increasing and keep increasing. This is the same thing.
Yeah.
You're taking stock into, making your body feel comfortable in its own skin, it's going to take you building that muscle to be able to do it, and it becomes very much easier. It's like I said, I don't even think about it anymore. I'm like doing it like I have
Yeah.
10 minutes between the next client. I need to do something really quick.
Yeah.
And then it's when it first started, you're right, it's really hard to go, okay, well, that didn't work. I'm
Right.
still feeling anxious.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, you probably are, but like try it on the 20th, 30th, 40th time and see if
Yeah.
that you're feeling as anxious as you were the first time.
Yeah, because we've certainly done the other thing 20, 30, 40, 50, and
Right.
9 billion times. So it definitely takes a little bit of work. Dr. Stacy, thank you so much for doing this. This was a blast. How can people find you, your blog posts? I don't know if you have any books or anything of that nature. Apologies for being ignorant, but if where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
That's okay. I actually have a published book. It is on childhood sexual abuse. It's Hope and Healing for Survivors.
Nice.
So it's through New Harbinger and it's available on Amazon. It's available pretty much anywhere. I also regularly write for Psychology Today, so be looking for articles there. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, and I'm starting or moving towards starting practice, but not there yet.
Nice. Well, thank you again for doing it. As you know, via the outline, the last question I ask everyone is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
The very first step is just acknowledge that it's okay with not being okay. Okay. Don't confuse staying busy with being okay. If you're high functioning, if your instinct during your divorce might be to focus like on work, staying busy, being the steady one. But you have to realize how it's going to show up. And you may miss it if you're not looking for it. Like it can show up as numbness, irritability, you're not going to collapse, is what I'm saying.
Right.
You're going to have to see the subtle changes in how you've been coping. And just because you're handling your responsibilities doesn't mean that you're processing that grief that I was talking about, the loss of your identity, the loss of the relationship. So I'd say really pay attention to what happens when you slow down.
Well,
Do you feel a heaviness? Do you feel anger? Do you feel shame? Is there something underneath it? And even if there is, that's okay.
right.
That's not a weakness. That is grief. That is the pure grief of a divorce. And it deserves the attention that you need to give it. Just remember, functioning is not the same as healing. Functioning is just we're going through what we need to do to survive, to provide, to do whatever our role says that we need to do in this moment.
Excellent words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Dr. Stacy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you are feeling alone on this journey, please join our Discord server. Becoming a phoenix is not a solitary act. It is one achieved through community. Our Discord server is just that, a community of men fighting to survive, thrive, and rise from their divorce. Go to risingphoenixpodcast.com/Discord for information on how to join and what is contained in our Discord server. Please join us.